to. And so we've wrapped together a very configurable set of products around now not only facial recognition, liveness, identity document, however that looks. And we have 3 different levels of document validation that we can offer now. But also now through the partnership with True Narrative, we can offer data. So we can actually offer, address verification, and sanctions, and any other checks that organisations, whether financial services or other sectors, may wish to add. Because what's coming down the line is digital identity.
So welcome to another episode of the App Store interviews. And would you believe it, 10 months into doing App Store interviews, and we are back in lockdown again. But luckily enough, I have a good friend to talk to, and it's Tony Machin. Tony is one of the founders of TrustID. And welcome, Tony, to the App Store interviews.
Thank you very much, John.
So, Tony, tell me about yourself.
Oh, wow. I am Chief Exec at TrustID. And before that, I've had a fairly mixed career, including military service in the Army. I've worked for an investment bank at Rothschilds, and I've run international businesses and operated Poland's largest financial intermediary, branch-based business. I joined TrustID in 2013 as leading a management buy-in.
Fantastic. So that kind of covers part of my next question, which was, how did you get to where you are today? How did you guys? I know that when you joined it from a management buyout perspective, it wasn't really doing exactly the same things as it does today. And perhaps you've answered it with some of your background in terms of your military and intelligence understanding. But tell me about. How did you come up with the idea of TrustID? Because you fused 2 things together, which is quite unique in your sector for biometrics. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, actually, the story started with I got a call. I'd just come back from Poland, having run the Polish business, and I got a call. I've always worked for private equity, or I have done a lot of work with private equity, and a couple of shareholders of TrustID, which was essentially a startup at that stage. I have to be honest, it was somebody else's initial concept, and I was asked to lead a buy-in and essentially capitalise the business and take it forward. And at that stage, it was literally had no office. It had an idea and it had a couple of scanners deployed. And what we looked at was the concept in terms of where does identity document validation sit in the economy going forward. It was becoming an increasing requirement, not just in financial services, but wherever you look. Identity is becoming a critical issue. It's certainly proving, who people are and who you're dealing with. And so we looked at that concept and thought, well, how can we develop this business into a more easily deployable service? So scanners are hardware, they're difficult, they have to be physically located. And so we very quickly obviously realized that cloud-based technology was going to be the way forward. And we spent several years doing that. And between 2014 and 2019, we launched a new product every year. And last year, we launched 3 new products in 2020. And we plan to launch a new product this year in 2021. And so you can see we are, hugely focused on product development. We have our own internal team doing that. And obviously listening to clients and understanding where identity validation is going. And no doubt we'll come back to that in terms of some of the pressures and what we think is coming down the line.
Yeah, and so actually, I was going to say to you, if I'd met you for the first time, what would the elevator pitch be that explained your business?
Well, it goes back to what I probably said earlier in terms of you think about where people need to check identity in the UK, and let's not even think about internationally, the same concept. Whether you're hiring a car, whether you're trying to prove your right to work in the UK, your right to rent, whether you're transacting financial services, whether you're trying to buy a mortgage, whether you're trying to get a lawyer, everybody will ask you for your identity. What we do very simply is we help businesses who are checking that identity is that identity real? And when I say the identity is real, it's not about data, it is about a physical document. So is the biometric residence permit real? Is that passport, that Nigerian passport, real? That's what we do. So wherever you think that a passport or an identity card is presented, for whatever reason, we're helping to make sure that that document is real at the point of presentation.
So, and when I talk about you fusing two types of approaches together, my understanding is that you've both got highly trained operatives within the business who have a fantastic understanding of all the different document types and for multiple different locations. Which you provide 24/7, but you also have technology that can automate that process as well for your customers.
Yeah, and I think that's evolved over the years. Whereas, when we set off, you had to put a document to a scanner. That was it, and it gave you, it's very one-dimensional. One thing I realised very quickly in getting into the industry was actually it has to be a risk-based approach. So actually, to a certain degree, if a builder is trying to, a contractor on a building site is trying to get a new brickie on, it might be that I just need to prove right to work. And actually, that needs to be a fairly low-level compliance-led process, which is using technology to make that very quick and effective and easy for the hiring manager to do. However, if that same builder is going on to a government infrastructure site with a massive security risk, the level of checking that needs to be done needs to be considerably higher, especially if you're doing it remotely. And therefore, yes, we will then kind of deploy additional expertise, and that might be better systems combined with more human intervention. It might be pure human intervention. So we essentially have a spectrum. We have a spectrum that might be systems driven for very low, fast, efficient kind of checking, all the way through to spending 45 minutes on a document because actually that's what's required in terms of the risk that that document poses.
Yeah. And I know that we've got direct integration with you guys. You've also got direct integrations with us. So we're both using each other's technologies. And I know that our customers are able to, through their case management functionality within our platform, they're able to route stuff directly to your operatives. And tell us about the kind of people that you employ.
That's a good question, because that's something that, as we've grown as a business, and you look at strategy and everything. In fact, one of the things we're looking at very much at the moment is people strategy, because actually fundamentally our unique selling point, our unique proposition is that human interaction that we can offer for that checking service. And therefore those people that are doing that, have to be obviously, of an intelligence and an attitude that are willing to look day in, day out at document images predominantly, and looking for errors and looking for fakes, understanding that the result of what they do has quite significant consequences. So, for example, most people say, well, okay, it must be exciting finding fake documents. It is, and we find fake documents every single day of the week, from all sorts of sources and in some bizarre scenarios where you wouldn't think the fake documents would be presented. But equally, I'm incredibly conscious that enthusiasm doesn't spill over to actually the biggest risk I find is actually, specifying a genuine document as fake. And so that balance in terms of that attitude and that attention to detail, that concentration is hugely important when you think these guys are sat at screens looking at documents day in, day out, and we've never got it wrong in all of the years that we're doing it, and getting those kind of people to do that kind of work to that level of diligence and to that level of kind of, for me, comfort, and for the outside world, credibility, are incredibly difficult. So we take people of what I'll call the right attitude and aptitude, and we train them, and we will train them to get to a level 1. Takes about 6 weeks. That's only allowing them access to the lower level of risk, and then they'll build up from that, ultimately trying to get to a level 4 analyst, which means they can do everything in terms of that, and that will probably take a minimum of 12 months.
And you've got some very important customers that use you direct as well in terms of the security level that you have to operate. to? Are you able to tell us some of those customers?
We operate in some sensitive areas, but no, I wouldn't want to talk about that in detail. But what's interesting in that is that what we are as an organisation now, and I suppose again in terms of differentials, is we are the only predominantly private sector business that does a huge amount of intelligence sharing with government. We do that on a purely anonymous basis. And that's allowed us, I suppose, and the key word, if you were to look at our three pillars of kind of running this business, clearly technology is fundamental. Our operational performance, as we've just discussed, is critical, but also is our credibility. This is a highly sensitive work that we do for some very sensitive people. And so we can't afford to get it wrong. And then actually interacting with that intelligence sharing piece that we do with the police, with immigration enforcement and people like that, allows us to kind of build on that knowledge, and it becomes a two-way kind of thing. So we get to learn about what maybe wider government agencies are seeing as risk in identity documents.
Yeah, my understanding is you're also sharing data with Amber Hill, aren't you? Which is very, very important. And and I think really what anybody listening is hearing is this is not some kind of offshore call center. These are highly trained operatives that are very connected into the two-way flow of intelligence within the UK, who can through our technology both automate a checking of a document, but also route it directly through automation to your team as an extension to their team as experts, and you provide significant SLAs. So we feel really privileged to be working with you, and certainly the reputation of TrustID in the marketplace is that they are certainly one of the most trustworthy biometrics fusion business, whereby you both provide the technology and the human eye, and are used by some of the most important and sensitive customers, including a number of ours. So you talked a lot about products, and you've launched some new products to the market. What's coming in the next 12, 24 months?
Well, I think in terms of where we are as a business, we support, I suppose, so many sectors in terms of ID validation. I say whether it's immigration related in terms of right to work, right to rent. We've always done counter fraud, so we work with a lot of local authorities. We do a lot of work in the NHS around people safety and things like that, and hiring. And I suppose the one area that we're moving into now, working with you guys, which has been incredibly useful, is obviously the whole kind of AML KYC market. And I think this year, what you'll see from TrustID is a stronger move into that sector, both by partnerships, by supporting existing providers, where we'll provide, as we do with you guys, that kind of technical support. But also there are parts of the market where actually, it's not served particularly well in terms of the smaller specialist area. And I think that's where we'll go into. And so we've wrapped together a very configurable set of products around now not only facial recognition, liveness, identity document, however that looks. And we have 3 different levels of document validation that we can offer now. But also now through the partnership with True Narrative, we can offer data. So we can actually offer, address verification and sanctions and any other checks that organisations, whether financial services or other sectors, may wish to add. Because, what's coming down the line is digital identity. And, COVID-19 has only accelerated that whole approach. And, so we're ready. And actually, the vast majority of what we've done over the last several years actually has been image-based validation, not real validation. So we're well positioned to do that.
So just thinking about digital identity and what's happened with the COVID emergency, do you see it certainly has accelerated the thinking of many of our clients to accelerate the way that they digitize their businesses? and that freed up their where they've done it well. That's freed up their employee base to easily be able to work from home and take on more more intelligent roles in some ways, in that they can spend more time on the exceptions. Do you see any changes in the behaviour of your customers? And what long term change do you think the impact of COVID has had on your customer base?
So I think there is definitely behavioural change, and there are in a lot of what we do, it's legislation driven. So a lot of checks are specified by certain legislation, and clearly that legislation has been relaxed for COVID-19. I suspect there is a chance that some of that legislation may remain relaxed for the foreseeable future, which opens the door to more digitisation and the more remote checking. The flip side to that is you can't get away from the fact that these checks are there for a reason, and the more things go remote, then the more reinforcement and the more confident people have got to be that those checks are done correctly. And therefore goes back then to the whole process of making sure it's not just a photocopy sent and gone through some kind of basic system. There is that bit. So I think people are waking up to this and understanding that I want to digitize, but I also want to have the comfort that it's right. And that's just kind of then driven. And of course, it's also driven by a very strong government agenda around digital identity. I mean, clearly the government has stated fairly publicly that it does want to have a more digital-driven economy. And that means that it wants to do stuff more remotely, including ID checks and onboarding and all the other stuff that we know there are huge lobbies and trade bodies out there saying. So we're there. I think there is a direction of travel that's going to happen. I think we are, as a business, very well positioned, but there are some significant challenges. Not least, how do ID validation businesses actually prove that the validation tools that they present work to an appropriate level? How do the checks get shared? That whole interoperability, if you're going into a digital identity world, how does a trusted party on one side know that even in the NHS this happens? If I do one check in one hospital, is it the same check that's been taking place in the next hospital? Because there's no consistency. So I think all of that still needs to be driven through. And I think for us as a business, the absolute key to that is intelligence. Intelligence is what's going to help you prove to clients as they become more digital aware that actually what we do is appropriate and mitigates the risk that they believe. And I say there's a whole spectrum of that. And that might be a simple cloud-based MRZ validation for certain sectors in certain scenarios, through to a full manual review of an image or of a physical document. Let's never lose the sight of the fact that we're talking about, there are still going to be scenarios where physical documents need to be presented and still checked. So I do think that's the direction of travel. I think there's some significant challenges. It's coming. And I think the word standards is the one that's going to be used an awful lot to make sure that we as providers are doing what's required to meet clients' increasing demands on making sure that these checks are done properly.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think it's not been a good thing, this pandemic, for the economy, for the health, and in many ways of the nation. But what it has done is accelerated, as it has done in many different fields, whether it be medical or technology. It's accelerated the race for digitization, and we've seen that through the move towards a cashless economy has accelerated, and it's important that we don't leave certain sectors of society behind in that move. And one of the things that we love about working with you guys is that the technology is so simple to use that we've always got to remember that if you're trying to automate the selfie and the document, it's always going to be as good as the person taking the picture, the aperture of the camera, the light, the situation. And the reality is, even very sophisticated AI like we have can't always take account of that. But the human eye can, and that's why we will never get away from the fact that in certain situations we need a human review, and that's what I love about the expertise that your team provide. And I also love about the way that you're automating that process. So, Tony, thank you so much for sparing the time today for this App Store interview. It was overdue. It was difficult to get in the diary because you guys are so busy. And thank you for sparing the time today. And I look forward to working with you in 2021. Partnership, both sides, us using your technology, you using ours, and hopefully us both continue to be very successful.
Yeah, and thanks for that, John. And likewise, I look forward to working with you guys. I think it's going to be, as we come out of COVID-19, it's going to be a very exciting period. And I think accelerated the services we both provide, I think they're just going to increase in demand.